Welcome to the Creativity and Culture Conference. On behalf of University for Life, let's welcome Kerri Lake. Kerri Lake is a teacher, coach and author, and she's written books like Listen Like a Horse and Relationships Without Dominance and A Sense of Self. Kerri is currently writing her third book and she's based in California, USA. So let's welcome Kerri Lake.
Today I'd like to offer you a new perspective on the familiar concept of common sense. So I hope you're in for a little bit of a challenge. I'm going to share with you some background of what I'm talking about, invite you into an experience so you can sense for yourself, and then I'd like to make this relevant for you in how it applies and actually contributes to the way we interact and relate with one another in every setting. In 2016, I had the amazing opportunity to facilitate a 90-minute workshop for corporate professionals, strategists, engineers, and facilitators in Silicon Valley, California. The workshop was called Bringing Consciousness to Work. What I shared with them was a tool of awareness called Mind Watch the Body that's designed to help people sense and feel their own presence in familiar and everyday settings. I shared Mind Watch the Body with them effectively enough for our exercise, and then asked everybody to stand up and exit the room for about 3 minutes. On their way out, we asked them to pick up a rock from the table by the door and simply hold this rock in their hand while they step outside. To make a priority of the sense of touch of the rock in their hand, the shape, the texture, the weight. And in the 3 minutes that they were out, we tore the room apart. We turned over tables, turned over chairs, moved everything and created chaos. So when we invited everybody back in, most of the people stepped in and looked at the chaos and just gasped, not really knowing what to do. I gave them the suggestion, let's just everybody keep your awareness on the rock in your hand. Let's let everybody have the same priority of the feel of the rock, and let's just put the room back together. With no discussion, no planning committee, with no conflicts and no question of anybody's intent, these 25 professionals worked in relative silence to put a room back together into a functional setting. Asking them to keep the priority on the sense of feel of the rock, it took the mind away from analysis and judgment of the outside area and placed their awareness on feeling themselves, feeling their own ability to actually show up and participate in whatever the task was at hand. In less than 90 seconds, the room was put back together, and afterward, several people came to me and offered that they felt like they had just come from a deep meditation. In other words, they felt more relaxed at the end of doing this work than when they began. Mindfulness and meditation are obviously not new concepts. For thousands of years, teachers, swamis, gurus have traveled from the East to the Western cultures to teach a different way of being, a different way of relating to ourselves, to one another, and to life. In our Western cultures, mindfulness and meditation have already begun a change in our culture. We already have brand new sets of expectations and norms for how life can be and potentially should be. In the United States and the UK, it's more common now that mindfulness is taught to children in schools as a foundational skill. And in one of the toughest schools in San Francisco, a a mindfulness technique of transcendental meditation was introduced in place of detention. So when children were being disciplined, they were brought into quiet time rather than detention. And what that shift did at this tough school is increase attendance by 98%. It increased cooperation and success in school by 78%. In 1978, what's known as the Maharishi effect happened when 7,000 people came together to meditate as one in hopes of positively affecting the immediate area as well as the planet at large. The studies of this event of 7,000 people meditating together resulted in an average of a 16% drop in crime and casualties from crime worldwide. Even in the realm of professional sports, where we might not even consider that mindfulness and meditation would even apply, Phil Jackson coached both the Chicago Bulls and the LA Lakers to multiple NBA basketball championships, and at the time, his approach was revolutionary. He invited his teams into group meditations. He invited his players to come together in a sense of a whole team rather than individual players trying to get the job done by themselves. In my words, what Phil Jackson did was invite his players to come together in a sense of harmony so they can feel not only themselves on the court, but they can feel their teammates on the court in a silent connection that everybody knows they are in because they're doing that together in their practices. Now, that might seem like one really good coach, right? But consider that one of Phil Jackson's players, Steve Kerr, has recently coached his team, the Golden State Warriors, to their own NBA basketball championship. It's clear all of the studies, decades of studies have been done by the HeartMath Institute, by the Institute of Noetic Science, that in every case demonstrates that when people consciously step into a mindful, harmonious state of being, the result is a decrease in conflict. So, to me, the appropriate next question is, how can we effectively integrate that state of being into our everyday lives without having to retreat into some sort of a specific practice that may or may not complement our ability to perform? Well, in a moment, I'm going to show you. Our ability to sense is common to everybody. Every human being has the ability to sense their environment, to sense their own presence, and to sense one another. Consider when you are in a room full of harmonious symphonic music. What does that feel like to you, to be in a room like that? And then consider being in a room full of cacophonous music, full of disharmonious and erratic music. And just look for yourself. Of course, we can hear the difference, but notice whether your body actually feels different in each of those rooms as well. We have the ability to hear and sense harmony in music because music is a vibration that our body is built to receive and communicate. By the same token, you have the ability to step into a room full of people who are happy to be with one another, who are working in collaboration, who are all moving in the same direction together. Consider what it would be like, what it would feel like to stand in that room. And then consider standing in a room full of people who are combative, who are competing with one another, who are looking for an angle just to keep their own survival going. who might be smiling, but are really unhappy with one another or even angry. Consider, does it feel different to you to be in each of those rooms? Dr. Masaru Emoto, showed us in his book, Messages from Water, that water itself responds differently to different frequencies and vibrations. What he did was expose water to classical music. He exposed water to heavy metal music, and then looked at the crystalline structure of that frozen water and found every single time that water took on a different shape, a different presence when exposed to one kind of music or another. And in the same way, he also exposed water to the unique tone and frequency, the consciousness of individual words like love, hate, and harmony. Each time, the water provided a unique representation of the ambiance of that word or consciousness. Now, consider that the human body is more than 75% water. Our bodies are designed to communicate vibration, to communicate the presence of the consciousness within music, within words, and within each other's presence. This is something that's common to everybody, although awareness and the education about functioning this way is, as yet, pretty uncommon. So this is where I'd like to invite you into an experience so you can sense and feel for yourself what I'm sharing with you. Just like the 25 professionals in our workshop, what I'm going to ask you to do is take a look at where your hands are. Maybe your hands are folded, touching one another. Maybe your arms are on the armrests. Maybe, like me, you carry a rock in your pocket, and it might be very easy to just pull your rock out and connect with your sense of touch. Let yourself be very aware of how your hands feel touching each other. Maybe you're touching the mouse, the computer mouse on your desk. But take all of your awareness right to that sense of touch and just let your breath out. Let your awareness, let the priority of your awareness be that sense of touch. While that sense of touch is your priority, please also notice you can still hear my voice. You can still understand the words that I'm saying. Prioritizing your sense of touch takes nothing away from your cognitive ability, from your ability to function. It's simply reorganizing your awareness so that you can be available to what you sense. What does this have to do with common sense? The conventional understanding of common sense is actually far more about thinking than it is sensing. In one culture, it might be common sense to use a spanking to discipline a child. And in another culture, it's common sense that spanking is the last resort. What we're talking about there is looking at cultural patterns and what a group of people finds to be good, bad, right, wrong, or obvious. Common thinking is not the same as common sensing. When we come together as a group and we are each aware of our priority of, in this case, our sense of touch, we are participating in what is common to us all. We are consciously working together from a foundation of our common sense, whether it's touch, whether it's feeling the presence in the room, whether it's our common ability to sense harmony. common sensing begins with each individual willing to be aware of feeling their own presence in their body. Something like the rock is a tool to help us be in that place. As each individual makes a priority of being aware and of sensing their own body, they actually empower others in the group to come into that same sense, that same state of being. Cultures change slowly when we focus on our differences. Cultures change exponentially when we creatively focus on what is common to us all. Even in celebrating our differences, we illuminate where our hearts are common, where our needs are common, where as humans, we have common wishes, desires, and creative ability to generate and share our hearts. In the workshop I shared with you in the beginning of my talk, where 25 professionals were asked to do some work that they never expected to do in a way that they may have never thought of before, everyone had their awareness arranged in a way where they were all functioning from a common sense. There was no question of anybody's integrity. There was no conflict with anybody's actions. People simply said yes to participating together in a way that got things done and left them more relaxed at the end than when they began. So, to bring this out into the world, to share with individuals who will then share with their teams, there's a very simple approach. First, let's empower the leaders at every level of society to know and sense their own presence. It might start as simply as carrying a rock in your pocket. But when the leaders are empowered to lead from a place of presence and awareness, they empower their teams to step into that relaxed and very aware state of being where the team functions in harmony. Second, empower individuals on the teams and beyond to know and receive the value of operating in this way, to know that their own presence on that team is of value. The team is different without their presence. It's an education not many people have had yet. And third, nurture a global community of individuals and groups who are functioning from this conscious awareness of sensing as a way of being that's common to us all. From that foundation, we can come together in service to the whole by recognizing that the real value in business, in any profession, in any organization, is the presence of the humans who show up to participate. Every single individual is a vast resource for cultural change. Every single individual has the capacity to know and sense their own value. As we empower the leaders and we empower the teammates, we find ourselves stepping naturally into this common sense of harmony. Every single person always has the option to function from a sense of harmony with all of life. The tools exist. It's time. Hearts are asking for a new way of being. Hearts are asking, how can we do this differently? It starts individually and propagates into groups and the whole, simply because harmony is our common sense. Thank you.
Hello there, Kerri.
Hello, Jasvir. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Very, very nice to be here with you too, Kerri. I loved your presentation, Kerri. That was a beautiful presentation. And what you said about harmony, it was just so, you just seemed to be so much in integrity between what you were saying and your whole body language as you were speaking. It all came out very harmonious. And my question to you is, I know that you feel very dedicated to this concept of harmony, but do you think that there may be some conflict between the concept of harmony and the concept of creativity? Because a lot of people who are creative tend to cause a lot of disruption. What are your thoughts on that?
It makes total sense and is still in integrity, in my view. If you look at harmony in musical terms, classical composers will deliberately use disharmony in their work. Composers like Bach and Mozart, even Brahms, who's known for lullabies, and even more modern composers like Stravinsky will deliberately work movements and sounds of disharmony to invoke the listener to feel something new, to feel something different, but to also become aware of the contrast between disharmony and harmony. When we bring it into the terms of social creativity and business creativity and disruption, these disruptive creations to me are an invitation for us to look from an even bigger perspective and see how disruptive creativity is actually contributing to the overall harmony. To me, the disruption is actually an invitation to see where a bigger harmony wants to express itself. And I have to go into nature with this as well. Nature, when left unobstructed, always finds harmony for itself. Nature always comes back into a harmony, but sometimes that requires forest fires. Sometimes it requires earthquakes and entire mountains changing. Disharmony is not separate from harmony. It's actually part of the dance.
I see what you mean. Yes. If we use the metaphor of nature and the weather, for example, there's all kinds of turbulence that we have to experience, like the storms, the thunderstorms, the typhoons and earthquakes even. They cause a lot of disharmony. But is it appropriate to apply those metaphors to our society?
That makes me want to ask if it's appropriate to remove humanity from nature. Humanity is part of nature. We can see ourselves and our way of being as part of a fluidity, even including our business interactions and our social and cultural interactions. When we realize that the way business functions, business is a system that humanity created. And yes, it has its rules. It has the analysis. It has best practices, of course.
In business, yeah, sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
What I would like people to consider is that business happens because humans created it. Business happens because humans show up for it. When we start to include our humanity, our human nature, this sense, our ability to sense one another, and include that as a priority among the business and professionalism that we enact, then we can start to see our interactions as in a fluid way, closer to the way we see nature. It's essentially inviting people to actually begin to recognize our humanity among business and professionalism.
But if we look at companies such as Google and Apple, do you think that the metaphor of nature applies to very large organizations like that?
Well, yes and no. We have to acknowledge that very large organizations operate as organizations. They're not operating like a forest, and they're not operating like a forest with an ocean right next to it. We have to acknowledge that the organization functions because it was built in a particular way. It was built with the sub-organizations. It was built with the revenue models. Let's acknowledge that. Where I'm suggesting to consider the metaphor of nature is to ask people to consider that a human is not a business structure. A human operates with senses. Whether we deny them or embrace them is an individual consideration. Some people embrace their sensory ability more than others, and one isn't better than the other. But the metaphor of nature is asking for the consideration that a human was not built by a business structure. Even people who are very identified with their job position, very identified with their role, they still have an empathic sense. They still have an ability to sense people around them, to sense their own emotions. And giving people the tools and empowerment to feel more comfortable acknowledging that natural part of themselves can be a huge contribution to the success of business and professional worlds.
But maybe smaller companies can handle the turbulence more harmoniously than larger organizations, because when we think of very large corporations that are built on hierarchies rather than networks, the turbulence can have much more of a damaging impact on the business than maybe the smaller organizations. Do you think that the metaphor applies more to the smaller organizations which are built as networks rather than the larger ones that are much more hierarchical?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The way I would apply the consideration of harmony in a larger organization is to work with primarily with the leaders of the sub-organizations, with the leaders of teams, and teach and empower this sort of awareness among the leadership, rather than throw this whole, concept of nature as one big metaphor at the whole organization. My question is, how can we empower the leaders of groups, the leaders of organizations, to be aware of communicating from a sense of harmony? Because the people around them will feel a different presence. Like, have you noticed a difference between leadership that just comes in and says, do it this way because I said so and you just have to get it done? Is that different than a leader that comes in and says, okay, we need to get everything done, and it needs to be done this way. Now, how can I empower you to be the best you can be? Because you know your job, you're going to be doing your job. It's the difference between a dominating leadership and a servant leadership. And go ahead.
Yes, I was just going to say that it depends on the context, doesn't it?
It really does.
It does, doesn't it? Because there are organizations where people just need to know. They don't want to think for themselves. People just need to know what needs to be done, by when, and when can they go home. And there are other organizations where people want to feel part of the bigger picture. But for a lot of people, the reality is that they don't really care what the bigger picture is, because they're just doing that particular job for the wage at the end of that it's a means to an end. It's not really part of their life. They don't really want to be associated with it deeply.
Yes, I get that. And for myself, even in that situation where people are just means to an end, give me my paycheck and get me out of here. If I'm a leader in that environment, I still have the option to create an environment that honors the humanity of that person. That one person, even if that one person can't wait to get out of there, that's fine. I'm not going to judge them for that. I can still create an environment that honors and has compassion for the humanity of that person, the way that they function, and not expect them to be different than they are. You came for a paycheck. Fantastic. I can still create and generate an atmosphere and a professional ambiance that appreciates that you even showed up, even if you can't wait to get out of here. And it doesn't, me as a leader in that situation I'm not dependent on whether that employee recognizes my efforts or not. My efforts are coming from my own willingness and my own desire to lead from a place of humaneness, compassion, and a knowledge of my ability to value the people who show up and get the work done.
So, do you think that, because obviously leaders are often the people who've actually set up the company, they're usually the people who have founded the business. So, do you not think that the organization simply reflects the personality of the leader? There will be some leaders who are very dominant, who are aggressive, who want to be successful by taking over the space of others, growing that way. And there will be others who are naturally very, very much gentler in their approach. So does the organization just simply take on the personality of the leader, that there are people who are naturally more aggressive than others? So why bother trying to change them, because people are the way they are?
True, very true. And I think there's actually been a ton of research done now about exactly that it is the culture of the whole company is often defined by the creator and the personality, the approach of the leadership and creator of the company. And of course, some people will be more aggressive and dominating, and others will be more compassionate and servant leadership. I don't know that it's wise to go in and try to change dominating people to be different than they are. I think what we're looking at is bringing awareness to this concept of servant leadership, to the concept of valuing the presence of the people who show up and do the job. And as we cultivate new leaders, as people who might be in the middle of a company but interested in being a leader, what I see is the opportunity to share this perspective, to share tools of awareness, so that even people who might start out being creative and then find they have employees who require, a more dominant approach, what we're really doing is setting a foundation of an ability to listen, to respond, to be compassionate to who you're working with. And even suggesting that approach to leadership changes the way we create a culture, because we're now listening in a different way to what leadership actually requires. So I don't know that it's wise to go into a dominating leader and say, oh, you need to change. Sorry, you're not compassionate, you're not harmonious. I don't think that that's necessarily wise. But to empower people who are interested, to provide tools for young people who realize there might be a different way to lead, or I wonder what my leadership style really is. To me, suggesting that there's a way to bring concepts of of a natural harmony, and that we have a capacity to feel what that harmony feels like and then apply our skills on a foundation of compassion and harmony, values the presence of individual humans who show up to get the work done.
Do you think that leadership and creativity always go hand in hand? Or do you think that there are certain leaders who are much more creative than others?
I don't think it's a rule that they go hand in hand. I think there can be leaders who are given a formula and they work the formula and everything works the way it was designed. They may or may not consider themselves creative. You know, maybe that same leader goes home and creates paintings and expresses their creativity a different way. Am I getting an echo?
Just slightly, but I suppose if we think about entrepreneurship, a lot of entrepreneurs, they have to be creative in order to establish their businesses, but not everyone in business is an entrepreneur. So as you say, it's some people might just be following the rule book because they are just part of someone else's organization. They haven't actually created that organization themselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Even if they are part of the organization, not necessarily the creator, even if they are working the model, humans have an innate ability to be creative simply by showing up. Like, let's make it really simple, okay? If I'm working the model and I'm not the creator of the whole company, I'm a mid-level manager, and I just want to get out there, get my work done, get my paycheck and go home. That person may or may not realize that they are a creative being, and that creativity can be as simple as taking an opportunity to smile at a coworker and say, "Hey, good job." Creativity can be as simple as recognizing an opportunity to do a routine task a little bit differently. That's a very simple expression of creativity that actually has an effect all around us. And it goes often missed and unacknowledged that even those tiny little recognitions can make a really big difference in how we feel while we do our work. The way we feel when we're doing our work has a huge effect on our productivity, has a huge effect on a team working together to accomplish a common task. And it's worth acknowledging that humans feel things. And as we create from a leadership position in a way that honors that humans actually feel things, and we set up our culture to honor and take into consideration that we'd love even the people taking a paycheck and going home, we'd love them to recognize and take their opportunities to acknowledge a coworker, to smile, to feel kind of awesome, even doing what they do. They don't have to, they can fight it if they want to, but at least the opportunity is there to feel good while they're doing what they're doing. That has an effect on the overall productivity and outcomes for the company as a whole. It's just very simply, it's worth acknowledging that humans are creative and feeling creatures, even though business and professional life doesn't seem to nurture that so much. We can become a presence and a leadership, a way of leading that, even if it's not written out as a rule, just as a human being, I can walk into the room with this consideration, and it changes the room around me, inviting people to show up and share their creativity even a little bit more.
I agree with everything that you're saying, that those people who stand out to be leaders, they are those people who go the extra mile, who add value in a way that is not expected of them, who are unique in some way. But maybe the going back to the point about harmony is that they even these leaders, unless it's their own company, they need to remain in harmony with the vision of the founder of the company, because if they're not in harmony with that vision, then there's not going to be a space for them for very long in the company. So that's the thing about, is harmony about maintaining the status quo if you're not right at the head of the company?
That's such a great question. And no, I don't think it's about maintaining status quo. I think harmony is about being willing to feel where the company is today, where I am today, where the leadership is today, or where the employees are, and being willing to move with the vision of the company, knowing that my ability to move with the vision of the company is related to my willingness to feel where I am, where my success is, where my fulfillment is, where my contribution is. It's acknowledging that, as well as following the directive of the company, as well as getting my work done and doing a good job, I actually am, just my presence and showing up, feeling good about what I'm doing, contributes to the overall harmony of the company. So yes, here's the leader saying, this is how it's going to be, and I want my people in harmony with me. Equally, I can say, I'm an employee, I'm feeling really good about what I'm doing, and that contributes all the way up to the leader as well. Every individual is a contribution to the overall harmony of the company. And the more we can acknowledge that and educate our people from that perspective, it starts to shift the culture as it is created from the top down, because it includes the wellness from the bottom up.
Okay, brilliant. Perfect. Well, that makes so much sense, Kerri. I really appreciate your insights into harmony and being good leaders. And there is so much more to say about this subject, and maybe we will follow on with this discussion another time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's just brilliant watching all the shifts that are happening already, that we can even have this conversation and share it with the world. So thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Kerri.
You're welcome.